Okay, I'll officially get started this morning by just welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Sawadee Kap. Today is what we call our group learning program. On Sundays and Wednesdays, we get together and I share the teachings of the Buddha with students in order to help you progress further on the path to enlightenment. The path to enlightenment is to train the mind and get to the enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, where by the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. This comes through training. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about believing a bunch of things and then hoping that something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then you're practicing his teachings. And as you're practicing his teachings, you're training the mind and uprooting pollutions out of the mind. The Buddha discovered 10 individual pollutions in the mind, and as part of your journey to enlightenment, you're learning what these are, and then you're working through the tools and techniques that he provides to uproot these pollutions out of the mind. As these pollutions are lifting out of the mind becomes more peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not even in the slightest of a bad mood. You're always in a good mood. Your mind has focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will really blossom. And as I mentioned, this comes through training of the mind. You're not believing a bunch of things, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because someone tried to convince you to believe it. So the Buddha's teachings are based on you being an independent practitioner and choosing to actively learn and actively train your mind, where you're on your own independent journey. A teacher is here as a guide, someone to help you and provide resources and show you the way to enlightenment, but it's each individual practitioner's own responsibility, their own independent journey to be able to make their way to enlightenment. So as part of our community here, we have lots of books, we have videos, podcasts, classes, courses, retreats. Everything's available to you at no cost. You can even get personal guidance if you like. We have classes here at the temple, and we even live stream too. So I'd like to welcome all of those who are joining us online through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, that you can attend these classes here at the temple, or you can attend online as well as you guys travel around the world. In this Sunday and Wednesdays, what we do on Sundays is I have a book series here. Volume 1, we go on Sundays chapter by chapter, and I teach you guys each chapter to lay a really good foundation on the path to enlightenment. And then on Wednesdays, we come together. I usually do meditation with you guys and guide you in meditation. And then I just open up to any and all questions that you guys have. It's just kind of a random question day, because during the Sundays, I'm teaching a certain topic, and then I pause at different times and open up to questions. But then students are oftentimes implementing those teachings into their life, and they might have questions, and they can ask any time during the week. We have, asking questions in class. We have a Facebook group where people can ask questions. You can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance. But on Wednesdays, it's kind of a nice day just for random questions. So if you have either learned the teachings of the Buddha other places, or maybe you're brand new to the teachings of the Buddha and you never really studied them before, and you've just kind of been seeing things around Thailand, or you've been reading things on books or seeing things on TV, and maybe you have all these different questions that you'd like to ask, this is a great time for you to be able to do that. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys here at the temple and those of you guys online. I'll guide you guys in meditation to get started. And then after meditation, I'll just open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to the teachings of the Buddha or the path to enlightenment or anything that you would like to discuss. So this meditation that I'll share with you guys is called Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in order to move his mind to enlightenment. But there's more than just meditation that you would need in order to get to enlightenment. But meditation is a big component of getting to enlightenment. So we usually start our classes with meditation. This breathing mindfulness meditation is going to help you train your mind to develop awareness of mind. It's going to help you develop concentration and train the mind to easily let go. This is one of the trainings that you do to uproot some of that pollution out of the mind, so that then you can start experiencing more peace and more joy in the mind, better relationships, more peace, more good moods, where as I mentioned, you get to the point where you're never even in a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. So let me just share with you guys some different things as we move into meditation, and then I'll actually provide most of the guidance while we're actually meditating. So in terms of body position, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught for meditation: seated, lying, standing, and walking. Most of you guys are all in the seated, or all of you guys are in the seated position, which is a common position to learn in. But there's also these other positions because your body can't permanently be in the same position all the time. You might need to switch, and we use these different positions at different times. But what I'll do is I'll guide you on the seated position, since you guys are all in the seated position. Is if you're on the floor, you usually have some cushions under your rear. This gets the hips up in the air and lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and it allows the circulation to flow in the legs. You can sit on the floor, but you can also sit in chairs or any other place like that. So if at any point you feel pain or you feel discomfort, get a chair or switch positions, change your body. You're not interested in being in pain. So just have your legs lightly crossed. This will allow the circulation to flow. Some people like to have multiple cushions under their rear. That's why we have so many cushions available, because the more cushions you put under the rear, it gets the hips up in the air. Some people even like to put their legs off the mat, which accomplishes the same thing, which is getting the hips up in the air. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. And if this is comfortable for you, you could use this. But this practice isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way, because all of our bodies are different and we're going to find different things to be comfortable. So there's a lot of different options here. You could put your palms like this, the way that the Buddha does, or you could put your palms face down on your thighs or on your knees. You could put them palm up. Whatever is comfortable for you, you find what's comfortable and what you like, and then use that. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic during your meditation. Or if you were real rigid, the mind might have a tendency to be overactive or uptight. But by keeping the upper body erect, it allows the mind to maintain this active attentiveness so that you can actively train the mind during the meditation. So if you have your upper body erect, this will help you to keep your mind attentive and alert during the meditation. I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in the chanting if you like. I have the chants on laminated sheet over there on the table. There's several of them that you guys can see on the small table in front of the bulletin board there. There's a whole bunch of laminated sheets with the original chants. We chant in what's called the Pali language. The Pali language is the language that the original teachings of the Buddha are captured in. And we do these chants, for me, as a way to ease into meditation. There's no rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship as part of the teachings of the Buddha. There's no prayer or anything like that. So when you hear me doing the chanting, it's not a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship. I'm not praying to anything. It just helps to bring some awareness to the mind, awareness to the breath, and then ease the mind into meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. On these laminated sheets, you'll see the English translations as well. And when you see the English translations, if you take a look at them, you're going to see a lot of respect and admiration for the Buddha, that people are chanting these chants out of respect and admiration and gratitude to the Buddha. I suspect the Buddha didn't actually create these chants, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated your ego or boastfulness or arrogance. So you're not going to go around teaching people to bow down to you and chant to you and admire you. Instead, he would have just helped people to learn how to move their mind to this enlightened mental state. And if you learn from somebody that helped you go from being angry and sad and frustrated and irritated, feeling guilt and shame and boredom and fears and all these other discontent feelings, and moving to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy that is enlightenment. And he didn't want anything from you. He didn't expect anything from you. He didn't ask anything of you. He just, out of the kindness of his heart, shared teachings to help people get to this enlightened mental state. You'd probably have a lot of respect and admiration for that person too. So as the Buddha was teaching more and more throughout his teaching career, from the age of 35 to 80, people had a lot of respect for him. And even today, the same thing, because his teachings really, truly work. When you learn and practice his teachings, you will see that your mind is moving to more and more peacefulness, that you can see the results now in this life. So that's why I share that the Buddha's teachings aren't believe, and hope something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning now, you're reflecting now to independently verify his teachings. You're practicing the teachings now in this life, and therefore you're actually seeing the results now in this life. So these chants that we do, it's to help ease the mind in the meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. In different courses and retreats, I teach students how to do the chanting. So if you ever interested in learning how to do chanting, you can definitely learn how to do that, because as I mentioned, it does help you get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Once we get into the meditation, I'm going to provide some guidance that you'll hear me kind of talking a little bit while we're all meditating together. I'll be kind of talking and kind of like helping you and guiding you in your meditation, so you'll know what to do while you're actually in the meditation. But then there's going to be a period of time where I'll just be quiet. I won't be talking at all, and we'll just all be meditating together. Those of us here at the temple and everybody online will just all be meditating together at the same time. Then after the meditation, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting as well, do some more chanting, and it'll ease us out of the meditation. And then I'll open up from there to any questions that you guys have related to any aspect of the teachings of the Buddha or the path to enlightenment. So if you guys need more cushions or you need a chanting sheet, you're welcome to get that at any point. Feel free to get up and move around as you need to do that. Yeah, feel free. Sometimes people will hand them out. If you guys would like to see the chants, you're welcome to see those. Yeah, for those of you guys that are here at the temple, and this might be your first time here, just to help you guys get more acquainted with the space, in the very back of the room, the very last door, there's a bathroom, so you can feel free to get up and use the restroom at any point. There's even restrooms outside the main classroom. If you go outside this door, you'll see signs that'll take you to the main bathroom for the whole temple. And then we have water here that is provided by our students that you're welcome to use at any point. We have cups and things like that that you guys are welcome to help yourself to water. So make yourself at home, make yourself comfortable. A temple doesn't belong to anybody. This isn't my classroom. It's not my temple. It doesn't belong to me. So it doesn't belong to anybody, but yet it belongs to all of us. Thailand has this national resource of temples all over the country that people can come into and learn at. So these are learning centers. These are cultural centers where you can actually come and learn and gain insight and understanding of the teachings that are going to help you in your life. So feel free to make yourself comfortable. So I'll go ahead and get started with some chanting, and you guys are welcome to join along. And then afterwards, I'll help you guys to learn the meditation as we're actually meditating together. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Tang Makavanang Apivateyami Savakato Makavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. Whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. There's no need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมหาเขวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly ease your way out of meditation, I will once again welcome all of you guys. Those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating, welcome to all of you guys. Those of you guys here at the temple and those of you guys online, welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Welcome to our class today. And for those of you guys that didn't hear, that might have came in later, there's a bathroom in the back of the room that you're welcome to use, and we even have some water here as well, so feel free to make yourself comfortable. This meditation that we just did, this is called Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in order to move his mind to the enlightened mental state. And the guidance that I was giving you during the meditation was to help you learn how to develop this practice. If you were meditating and you experienced a bombardment of thoughts and lots of rapid thoughts, this is very normal during the meditation when you first get started. Or you might have had a thought and you kind of indulged in that thought for a period of time and kind of followed it and realized, oh yeah, that's right, I'm meditating. Let me bring the mind back to the breath. Or if you heard various sounds going on around and you kind of got irritated or annoyed during the meditation, this is what the unenlightened mind does, that it's not comfortable with certain things that are happening around. So I'll explain this to you. But first, let me talk to you a little bit about this meditation and the goal of the meditation. And as I mentioned, eventually we'll get to the point where I'll just open up to questions that you guys might have, any questions whatsoever. The goal of this meditation is to cultivate mindfulness and concentration, as well as eliminating what we call craving, desire, attachment. What mindfulness is awareness of mind, where you can have awareness of what's going on in the mind. Because in the unenlightened state, we oftentimes lack awareness of what's going on in the mind. So if you're going to purify the mind and eliminate the unwholesome qualities that are producing these discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these discontent feelings, you're going to need to have awareness of what's going on in the mind so that you can then purify it. So this meditation, when you're focusing on the breath, you're starting to develop this awareness of what's going on in the mind. And then you're developing concentration, being able to focus on a single object like the breath. So the mind starts getting this focus and clarity as you train the mind and you exercise it like this more and more. If this is the first time you were meditating, you may not have even experienced any of those types of things, but as you train your mind more and more and exercise it, you'll see more and more of the qualities of mindfulness and concentration arising. Much like you do when you're exercising at a gym and you're exercising a muscle. The first time you go in, you're just trying to get your bearings of what's going on at this gym and try to figure it out. But as you exercise with these weights more and more and more, you build up the muscle and it becomes stronger and stronger, and you can now use it to control the body. The same thing is true with the mind. Is as you exercise it more and more in meditation, you get to the point where you can control the mind and the mind is disciplined. When your mind is sad and angry and frustrated and experiencing all those discontent feelings, you just don't have control over your mind. You haven't learned how to train your mind yet to be able to have control so that you can experience peace and joy permanently for the rest of this life. So having mindfulness and the concentration that I described as part of this meditation, those are two key qualities that you need to develop on your journey to enlightenment, among other wholesome qualities that you'll need to develop in the mind. And then what you're doing when the mind moves off the breath is you're training the mind to easily let go and come back to the breath. The goal of this meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. Oftentimes people, when they hear the guidance, they think the goal is to eliminate your thoughts. As long as you're alive, you're going to have thoughts. You can't actually eliminate your thoughts, but you can get to the point where you quiet the mind or you still the mind. And you'll notice that by the time you get to enlightenment, when you're meditating, you'll still have occasional thoughts during your meditation, but rather than that bombardment of thoughts, rapid thoughts, or indulging in a thought and then realizing 2 or 3 minutes down the road that you have been meditating and you need to bring your mind back to the breath, by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have a thought, but you'll notice it right away and you'll be able to bring your mind back to the breath very easily, very readily. And then there'll be these long periods of time in your meditation where the mind will be quieted and it'll be stilled. So the goal isn't to actually eliminate your thoughts, but it's to build this mindfulness or awareness of mind, concentration or focus and clarity, and to be able to easily let things go. Because what's causing the mind to be angry and frustrated and irritated and all of these discontent feelings is something we call craving, desire, attachment. These are like wants or expectations. The mind is longing and yearning. It's chasing after the objects of its affection in the unenlightened state. The mind is pulling towards certain things. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. You get happy, excited, elated, thrilled, maybe euphoric. But then when you don't get what you want, you get angry, you get frustrated, you get irritated, you get annoyed, some kind of painful feeling. So the mind in the unenlightened state is experiencing these pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement in others, and it's experiencing these painful feelings of sadness, anger, frustration in others, and these feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant, kind of like shyness or some kind of like uncomfortableness. Like if somebody came and sat really close to you right now that you didn't know and your body was touching their body, you probably say, it's not pleasant. It's not painful. The mind is kind of uncomfortable. So the mind in the unenlightened state is experiencing these pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. It's kind of going up and down at different times during your life. And the reason why, the cause of this is craving, desire, attachment, this longing, this yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. And the mind can only be happy when these things happen this way. These are called conditioned feelings. If my bank account is this, if my mom does this, if the weather is this, If my friends do this, I will then be happy. If I get a new car, new shoes, new clothes, I will be happy. But when you don't get what you want, maybe your mom does something you don't like, maybe somebody else does something that you don't like, the mind gets irritated or frustrated or agitated. So essentially, when you understand what craving, desire, attachment is, this longing and yearning, the mind wanting things to be a certain way, what you start realizing is your mind is causing all these discontent feelings. The anger, the sadness, the frustration, all of those feelings that are oftentimes blamed on other people. You might be blaming these feelings on other people or thinking that other people are causing you to experience these feelings. What you learn in the teachings of the Buddha, and that you can independently verify, is that your mind is causing these feelings itself. And when you can come to terms with that and you can see the truth that your mind is causing these feelings itself, then you know what the real problem is. And then you can start implementing solutions and experience a real solution. Because as long as you falsely believe that your feelings are being caused by somebody else or something else external, you will tend to push people away out of your life. When somebody does something that you find to be disagreeable and you experience painful feelings, you will attribute those painful feelings to this person or to this situation. And then you will push those people out of your life, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But when you push people out of your life, it doesn't solve the problem because you keep getting irritated or frustrated or annoyed about something else. It's only a matter of time. That's how you know that that's not the problem. Or you might become bitter and harsh and hostile towards somebody, and then they choose to leave out of your life. Or you might put your expectations on somebody and try to control them or pressure them to do things your way. And as long as you do this, pushing people away, being bitter and harsh and hostile, and putting your expectations on people, you can't live harmoniously with all people. The number of people you can spend time with will become fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer, and your life will become more and more isolated. But when you understand what the real problem is, which is within the own mind, these pollutions that the Buddha discovered, when you start understanding what these pollutions are and you start uprooting them with the tools and techniques that he shared, then you can actually get to a real solution where you can start seeing the mind becoming more peaceful and more joyful. That happiness that you experience based on your cravings, desires, attachments, it's impermanent. It's temporary. For example, if somebody in the unenlightened state wakes up in the morning and they see that it's sunny outside, they might get really happy and really excited. But then when they go take a shower and they come out and they see it's raining, they might get sad or frustrated or irritated because the happiness was based on some condition like the sun. The sun is not permanent. So therefore, the feeling of happiness is not permanent. That feeling arises, it changes, and it fades away. This is called a conditioned feeling. So as long as the mind is producing feelings based on some condition, like the sun, or the amount of money in your bank account, or how many friends you have, or your boss, or your mom, or your dad, as long as you're basing your inner feelings on something external, these external things are all impermanent. So now when those things start changing, your feelings are going to change too. So this is why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because your mind is forming these conditioned feelings. If my bank account is this, I'll be happy. But if my bank account is this, I'll be sad. If my mom does this, I'll be happy. But if she does this, I'm going to be sad. Or if my boss does this, I'll be happy. And if my boss does this, I'm going to be sad and angry and frustrated. So your mind is bound up with these pollutions, forming its inner feelings on some condition. And as long as you keep allowing the mind to do this and the mind remains untrained, you'll keep experiencing this up and down and up and down and up and down. So the teachings of the Buddha, among other things that he's sharing, this meditation is training your mind to let go. So that in daily life, when you're going around the world and you have a certain craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you can notice this with your mindfulness, your awareness of mind. If you're in the mall and you're walking through the mall and you see a brand new pair of shoes and you're like, oh yes, new pair of shoes. Yes, 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 yes. I want those so badly. Yes, it's going to be so perfect. Oh, everything's going to be wonderful in my life when I get this new pair of shoes. Well, you can see that. You can observe that with your mindfulness, your awareness of mind, that your mind's pulling towards the objects of your affection. Or if you think that a boyfriend or girlfriend is just going to make everything perfect in your life, and if you can just get that boyfriend or girlfriend, everything would be perfect. Or if you could just get that certain amount of money in your bank, everything would be perfect. If you see those longing and yearning, the mind's craving for these things, if you can see it with your mindfulness, then you can let that go. You can restrain the mind. And instead of chasing things as a craving, desire, attachment, you can pursue things as a goal, as an objective, or an interest. You can gradually work towards more income, or you can gradually work towards certain goals or objectives that you have, rather than chasing after them and thinking that this thing is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. You might put all your hopes and dreams into a certain relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and think that this person is going to somehow miraculously make you whole and make you feel complete. And you put all your hopes and dreams into this relationship and onto this person. And when you do, you start getting happy and excited when you guys first together. But then over time, as this relationship becomes more and more difficult and you guys become angry and frustrated and agitated each other and the relationship's over, now you'll be frustrated and angry and sad because the mind is craving permanence. The mind is longing, yearning, wanting things to be permanent. But yet you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is impermanent. Whether it's your relationships, your bank account, your job, your clothing, this class, the people here, this is all impermanent, but yet the mind is craving for things to be permanent. So if during meditation, for example, if you crave for it to be quiet and crave for it to be silent, when you hear a little bit of noise or a little bit of dogs barking or the tools or the cars going by, you might get irritated or frustrated because you might be craving for it to be silent. And you can only meditate and be happy when it's silent. And that's the only time that you can experience that happiness or a certain feeling. But if you can train your mind to understand that all these things around you are impermanent, that you can't have permanent silence, it's just not possible. But also that sound that you hear, that's impermanent too. Eventually, the sound will be gone, right? So all these different things around us are impermanent, but yet the mind's craving permanence. So you might be craving your bank account to be permanently one balance. But then when it goes down, you're sad or frustrated. So if you form your inner feelings on this craving of, I want my bank account to be this, even if you work your way up to that particular point, then your mind's going to want more. You want more and more and more and more. And the mind's never satisfied. It keeps pursuing these cravings over and over and over again. So this is what the unenlightened mind is doing at its core, is it's having this craving, this desire, this attachment. And when it gets what it wants, the longing and yearning, and you get the objects of your affection, you get happy. And when you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. And sometimes that's anger. And unfortunately, what the unenlightened mind does when it misunderstands what the real problem is it will push people away. It'll be bitter and harsh and hostile, or put expectations on people. And where all this is coming from is just a lack of wisdom. You're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong necessarily. Every individual that's ever been born is unenlightened. But what this path to enlightenment is for individuals who are done with the anger, they're done with the sadness, they're tired of feeling that the grief and the misery and the sadness and all those other painful feelings, and they're interested in getting to the peace and joy where you can experience that for the rest of your life. And through training your mind, through learning teachings of the Buddha, independently verifying them that they're true, and then practicing them and uprooting these pollutions out of the mind, you can get to the point where your mind's always peaceful and always joyful, never even in a bad mood anymore. And this meditation is an important component of that. So we build up our practice to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. And that's not something you're going to probably be able to do right off the bat, but slowly but surely, 6 months, a year, 2 years into it, you get to the point where you're meditating about 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more. Some people start with one session for 5 minutes, and that's just where they're at. Wonderful. Start there. One session for 5 minutes, or 2 sessions for 10 or 15 minutes. All right, start there. If that's where you'd like to start, then you start there. But then gradually build it up 6 months, a year, 2 years, where you create more and more space in your life, where maybe you don't search social media as much. Maybe you don't watch as many YouTube videos. Maybe you don't go out and party and drink and do other things that you might be doing now that are unwise and unbeneficial. You start clearing some of those things out of your life, and you start ramping up this life practice where now you're training your mind on a regular basis, where you learn from books, you learn from classes, you talk with teachers, you get help to train your mind. So the teachings of the Buddha, they're not a bunch of rules, they're not a bunch of commandments, they're not a bunch of beliefs. Instead, what you're doing is you're learning teachings, you're reflecting on those, and you're practicing them. And this is going to help you to train your mind. Essentially, what the Buddha did is he taught this better way of life. There's not a religion, there's not a doctrine, there's not a bunch of commandments that one would follow. The Buddha didn't use guilt, shame, and fear in order to convince people to practice his teachings. He already got to this peaceful and joyful mental state where his mind was peaceful and joyful for the rest of his life. And then he just spent from the age of 35 until 80, 45 years, sharing with people how to get to that same mental state. If they were interested in getting to that mental state. If they weren't interested in getting to that mental state, he didn't teach them. He didn't share the teachings with them. It was only the people who came to learn with him that he would then share those teachings and help people to understand how he got to this peaceful and joyful mental state. What a Buddha does is a Buddha actually gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They're able to get to enlightenment, this peaceful and joyful mental state on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then after they awaken to enlightenment, based on their own independent journey, they then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those independently discovered teachings with countless people during their life. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. And then the third criteria of what makes a Buddha is that they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So this individual that we refer to as the Buddha or Gautama Buddha, and there's other ways to refer to him as well, he got to enlightenment by himself without the help of any teachers or any guides. He dedicated the rest of his life from the age of 35 to 80 to sharing his teachings, and countless people got to enlightenment during his lifetime. Then he preserved his teachings in such a way that countless more people got to enlightenment after his death. And even today, there's people that are still getting to enlightenment based on his teachings. So that's what is available to you if you decide you would like to get rid of the anger and sadness and frustration, that you can get access to books and videos, podcasts, all kinds of resources and classes and courses and retreats, all available to you at no cost, even personal guidance to meet with a teacher one-on-one. You can access all these things from our website. The printed books, we just ask for people to reimburse us for the printing cost, but otherwise everything is available to you at no cost so that you can learn and grow and develop and train your mind to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. And it just takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, it takes diligence. We can provide you the resources and the guidance, but each individual person has to decide that they are done with these painful feelings and they would like to get rid of all of this and train their mind to get to the peace and joy. So if you'd like access to all of that, you're welcome to partake in learning and developing your mind, and you'll see the truth for yourself that it truly works. So what I'd like to do is turn things over to all of you guys to ask any and all questions that you like, anything that you've been learning about the teachings of the Buddha, or maybe this is your first time ever coming to a temple to even learn anything. Maybe you've been seeing some things around Thailand with the temples or things online that you have questions about. You can ask any and all questions that you like. If you're here at the temple, we have microphones here in this white bowl. If you get a microphone and you just press the gray switch on the front, that way the people online will be able to hear your question when you ask your question. And those of you guys that are online, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your question into the comment section and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So is there anybody that has any questions that you guys would like to ask? Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind getting a microphone. We have 2 microphones. You guys can pass those around and hand them around and share them. I think so, yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could speak.
I think maybe it's not on.
Okay.
Yeah, is the light on?
No.
If you press the gray button, it should be. There you go.
How about now?
Ah, you got it. There you
go. I was wondering if you could speak to indecisiveness, something I struggle with a lot, and I found myself feeling very indecisive here in Chiang Mai. Lots of amazing things on offer, limited time to fit it all in, and a craving to not miss out on anything. But even kind of knowing this, and it's not possible to do everything, still find this real battle with my mind to make a decision, always trying to find the optimum option. Yeah.
Sure. So as you mentioned, this is because of craving, right? The mind's craving something. The Buddha calls what you're describing indecisiveness. He calls it wavering. The mind wavers. And the reason why is because there's these 3 poisons that we refer to as craving, anger, and ignorance, or unknowing of true reality, that are in the mind. They really boil down to 10 individual pollutions called the 10 fetters. These are 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered, and then he gives you the tools and techniques of how to eliminate them from the mind. But oftentimes we talk about them from a high level in order to help people understand what's going on in the mind. So the mind craves, it longs, it yearns, it has desires, it thinks that these external things are going to provide some lasting satisfaction, so it chases after them. And if it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. If it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. Then part of those painful feelings are the anger, the bitterness, the hostility, the animosity, the resentfulness that arises in the mind. And that's where one might push someone away, be bitter and harsh and hostile, or put your expectations on someone. And where all this is coming from is the mind's unknowing of true reality, the confusion, the delusion, the misunderstanding, the ignorance is what it's called. But the Buddha didn't use the word in a derogatory way. We're translating what he used to this word ignorance. Today, that word ignorance is kind of a derogatory word or demeaning word, where I like to use the phrase unknowing of true reality, because the unenlightened mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand that there's these cravings in there, that it's trying to seek some kind of satisfaction and fulfillment externally. And as long as you keep allowing the mind to chase after those things, yeah, you're going to get what you want sometimes, and you're going to get happy. But then other times you're not going to get what you want, and you get painful feelings. So the mind's going up and down or up and down. And even if you get what you want, those pleasant feelings are temporary. So ultimately the mind ends up in dissatisfaction anyway, because maybe you'll be happy for a day or two, or an hour or two, or a week or two, but then ultimately the mind ends up back to the sadness and the frustration and other feelings like this. So the mind's kind of stuck in this cycle. It just keeps going around and around and around. It chases after things. It sometimes gets what it wants. It ends up ultimately in the painful feelings, or it chases after things, it doesn't get what it wants, and then ends up in the painful feelings, and it just keeps going around and around due to its lack of wisdom, this ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So where you see your mind wavering and being indecisive, this is coming from that lack of wisdom, that unknowing of true reality, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It hasn't been trained. It's not well disciplined. It's not well controlled. The mind is almost like a wild animal. It kind of runs around and frolics in the forest, and it wants to be this wild animal. And then there's this person, right? Because there's a body, there's a mind, and these two things coming together, we call a person. So there's kind of these 3 things: the body, the mind, and then the person. The mind wants to run around in the forest and be like this wild animal. But the person is like, hold on a second, I don't like all of this indecisiveness. I don't like you chasing after all these objects of your affection and wanting to get in all these things in Chiang Mai and take in all of these things. And hey, you can't do that. It's not possible. You're only going to be here for a limited time. And then your mind's like, no, I want to do everything. Like, I got to do everything now on this trip, you know? So the mind is almost like a not only a wild animal, but it's kind of like a 3-year-old kid throwing a temper tantrum. It's like, give me what I want. Give me what I want. Mommy, daddy, give me that chocolate. Give me that chocolate. And if you give the child the chocolate, they're happy. But then at some point, mom and dad say, no, you can't have chocolate. They're angry, right? They're frustrated because the mind is having craving, desire, attachment. So your mind is craving these things in Chiang Mai. You're seeing all these options. And what you would like to do is restrain the mind. It's going to be hard for you because you haven't been maybe regularly training the mind. So that's why you do the meditation, and there's other techniques too that you do regularly and consistently. So you have the ability to restrain the mind. And the more and more you restrain the mind, you get more control. It won't do what it's currently doing. By the time you get to enlightenment, you can go to a new city, see all the options that are available, and just be like, all right, well, I'm only going to be here for 5 days. I'll do what I can do, and I'll just take it one day at a time, one moment at a time, and just one thing at a time, rather than I got to get all this stuff. I got to do all these things, right? So there's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. There's nothing that I could say to you in a 5-minute response or 2-minute response is going to instantly transform your mind. But what I can share with you is where you see your mind craving, try to restrain it, almost like you're riding a horse and you're pulling the reins back on the horse. If you've ever ridden a horse, you pull the reins back and you restrain the mind. And again, this is going to be challenging because your mind maybe hasn't had as much training as you will ultimately need in order to get to this peace and joy. But that's something that you can be doing, and just take it moment by moment, realize that you're not going to be able to do everything. It's not possible. And that you're on this life journey. You can always come back to Chiang Mai another time if you like, and do things another time. And rather than looking at the quantity of things that you're partaking in, look at the quality. So spend quality time in each individual event. So even if you'd only do 2 or 3 things a day, spend good quality time in thoroughly enjoying and learning and cultivating wisdom in those experiences, rather than trying to do 8 or 10 things in a day. It's better to do less things, better quality, than to just look at, let me just do a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Is quite specific and personal to my meditation process. I think instead of being distracted by the sound around me or the thoughts, I think I had very few thoughts during. I think my distraction is to sometimes I see shapes and patterns and lights with colors. When my eyes closed, and sometimes I could be quite frightened seeing them and get distracted. Is that normal? Is that something some people see during meditation?
Yeah, this is very normal. So sight is actually happening inside the brain. The eyeball itself is just a lens that takes in light, but the sight is actually happening inside the brain. So when you close the eyes, you can actually still see certain things because all the sight is happening inside the brain. So you're training the mind, and then the brain is something separate. These are 2 separate things. The brain is the physical organ, and then the mind is this intangible, non-physical thing. And as you're training the mind, there's an effect to the brain. And as you're clearing out more and more pollution out of the mind, it affects the brain in a positive way. The scientists are showing us this nowadays, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't have the science that we have today, where we can do MRIs and CAT scans and things like this, other electronic tests, that doctors, researchers, scientists are testing long-term meditators, and they're seeing the physical structures of the brain change. And you can actually sometimes feel this for yourself as you're meditating. You can either hear it, or you can feel less pressure in the skull sometimes as you're starting to meditate longer periods. So those different colors and different visual things that you're seeing, what this is you're training the mind. the mind has an effect on the brain. The physical structures are starting to change and adjust in a positive way. And this oftentimes produces various colors or vivid imagery that you're not used to. You can even get to the point where as you're lifting out this pollution out of the mind, you start having memories, pretty vivid memories, either from this life or even previous lives. This is one of the ways that people verify the cycle of rebirth is true, that we experience multiple lives, because you start to be able to observe your past lives sometimes. But at the very least, even just colors, like different colors that you're experiencing, this is just the physical structures of the brain changing. And because sight is inside the brain, as those structures are changing, you can experience white or green or purple or different shapes or different memories and things like this. You don't need to be scared or feel fearful of these things. It's actually a very positive thing that this is occurring. The only reason why the mind experiences any discontent feelings, including fear, is because there's certain cravings in the mind. There's this longing, yearning. The mind wants things to be a certain way. And when it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement in others. And when it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. And fear is part of those painful feelings. So like during meditation, if you crave for it to be quiet, when you hear a dog bark during meditation, you might get irritated or annoyed, or if you hear a tool or a car or something like this. But the same thing is true if in meditation you have a craving that you won't see anything, and now you see these colors or you see these images, you might get fear. That's one of the discontent feelings that could potentially arise, or you could just get irritated or annoyed. So you shouldn't have any expectation, any wanting, any craving, any longing for things to be a certain way during meditation. You just sit or stand or lie or walking, whatever meditation position you're going to use. You just take that position, you start your meditation, you train your mind, whatever happens, happens. If you are experiencing a bombardment of thoughts, that wasn't a bad meditation because you're more aware of what's going on in the mind. If you do a meditation and you experience colors or other things going on, that wasn't a bad meditation. It's just what's going on in the mind. You're aware of that. So you're developing mindfulness, you're developing concentration. And when those things come up in the mind, you just cut it off and bring the mind back to the breath. So if you see a certain color or certain images, just cut it off and bring the mind back to the breath. So it's always this craving, desire, attachment. Anytime you experience discontent feelings, it's always because of craving, desire, attachment. The discontent feelings like the anger, the sadness, the fear, all these other discontent feelings like boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, this is like a red light on the dashboard of your car. If you have a car and the red light on the dashboard comes on, you're like, oh, there's a problem in this car. I need to pull over and I need to investigate what's going on in this car. And if you don't have this training, you probably take your car to a mechanic and the mechanic will look at your car and tell you what's wrong with it. Well, these discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, this is a red light on the dashboard of your car telling you and alerting you, hey, there's something going on here in your mind. You've got craving, desire, attachment in your mind, and you need to pull over and you need to look inward and see what are the discontent feelings. What are the cravings that are causing these discontent feelings? And just like you develop the skill and ability to train the mind in meditation, you're going to need to develop the skill and ability to identify your cravings, desires, attachments. What are they? And in some cases, you're not going to have the wisdom of how to do that when you're first getting started. So you need to take your mind to the mechanic. The mechanic is your Buddhist teacher. You come visit with your Buddhist teacher either at a class or privately, and you say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I'm noticing these discontent feelings. It's happening in these situations. I can't figure out what my cravings, desires, attachments are. And then once you learn what they are, there's ways to skillfully go in and actually eliminate them. So I'll give you an example from my life so you can understand what I'm talking about. There was a period of time where one time I left my house and I accidentally left my mobile phone at home. And this fear arose in my mind when I noticed that I didn't have my mobile phone in my pocket. And right away, I wanted to turn around and go get the phone. That's what the mind was thinking. Well, that's the mind craving permanence. The mind thinks that, I'm fearful. the way to solve this is I don't have my phone with me. Let me go get my phone. And if I have my phone, I won't be fearful. But that's just the mind craving permanence. It's wanting this phone to be permanent. So rather than turn around to go get the phone, I decided to continue in my day and don't go back and get the phone. I was only supposed to be out for about an hour and a half that day doing a couple things outside, but I extended the amount of time that I was outside. I was outside like 5 hours, 6 hours. I went to the movies. I went to go get something to eat. I did all these different things that I wasn't planning to do because I was trying to train my mind that this phone is not permanent. You can't have this phone permanently. At that time, it was a craving, desire, attachment, not the phone itself. It's not the object that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's the mind longing and yearning for this object, wanting it to be permanent. In the mind, at one time, if I had the phone, I can be happy. But if I don't have the phone, then the mind is having fear. So rather than turn around to go get the phone, which doesn't solve the problem because the craving is still in the mind, the very next time I don't have the phone with me, the fear will arise. So over the course of several weeks, I kept intentionally leaving the phone at home occasionally in order to train the mind to go out into the world without the phone, and that you can be peaceful, you can be joyful, whether you have the phone or whether you don't have the phone, you can be peaceful and joyful. And then after doing that, there was a period of time for about 2 months where I just took the phone out every day because it's kind of a wise decision to have a phone with you. But then after about 2 months, there was a situation where I accidentally left it at home again, and I reached for my pocket and the phone wasn't there, and I was like, oh well, I left it at home. We'll just keep going in our day. No fear, because the craving had been eliminated. If I would have gone back home and gotten the phone, the fear would have still been there. So by training the mind to go out in the world without the phone over multiple situations, I was able to eliminate the craving, and then now there's no fear when the phone is left at home. So you're going to notice, if you decide to journey on the path to enlightenment, that there's going to be certain discontent feelings that come up at different times related to any number of cravings, desires, attachments that you have. And if you can learn how to not only meditate and train your mind in meditation, but to then identify what your cravings are, even in daily life, then you can do things like what I just described, which is put your mind in the situation that it finds to be uncomfortable and then train it to let go. So if you're finding that your mind is fearful in meditation when these things are happening, then as those things are happening, just cut that off, cut that fear off, restrain the mind, bring the mind back to the breath, and realize that there's nothing to fear. Sometimes where fear comes from is like a fear of the unknown, like not knowing what it is. So now that you know what it is, that's why I shared with you what it is. Sometimes now that you know what it is, it's like, all right, yeah, I understand my brain's changing. This is a very positive thing. No reason to be fearful. But other times the craving in there is like if you were afraid of spiders, if you had fear of spiders or fear of snakes, one of the things that you might think is going to solve this problem is to push this away. That's the aversion. The mind thinks if I push these spiders away and I push these snakes away and I never see a snake, I never see a spider, then everything will be perfect. But it's not, because the craving is still in the mind. The mind's craving and longing and yearning to never see a spider, never see a snake. So what I would guide a student to do is actually put the mind in the situation that it's fearing, is to look at pictures of snakes or spiders like in a magazine or on the internet, or go to museums where there's spiders and there's snakes. Go to different places where you can see them in their natural habitat. The more you come in contact with snakes and spiders, you desensitize the mind to being afraid of snakes and afraid of spiders. The mind is conditioned in this example to think that spiders are bad or snakes are bad. And if I see a snake or I see a spider, something bad's going to happen to me. So if you can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different experiences where you put your mind in the situation that it fears, and you can see, I just saw a snake and nothing bad happened. I just saw a spider and nothing bad happened. You can eliminate this conditioning of the mind that the mind's clinging to and holding on to, and you can replace that with snakes don't mean something bad's going to happen. Spiders doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen. It's just another being. It's an animal, and it's not going to bother me. I'm not doing anything harmful to the snake, so the snake's not going to harm me. I'm not doing anything harmful to the spider, so the spider's not going to harm me. So these kind of things will happen And yes, meditation is important, but there's other training to implement as well. The Buddha taught this core central teaching called the Eightfold Path, which you learn in a lot of detail using the original words of the Buddha in the various courses and retreats that I share. And this is the core central path that's going to help you to be able to train your mind to get to enlightenment. And some of the things that I just referenced are part of that Eightfold Path. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am. We have microphones here.
Hi.
Hello.
So my English is not the best. I'm gonna try. So my question is, how do you do, for example, because we are not just spirit floating in the world. We have a body, you know. So we need and deserve eat or have a house or, you know, enjoy, because we are here for that. So my question is, I'm gonna put an example, for example, with the money that you say before. How we can do, or how do you do to create, because we deserve the money to live in this life. So how do you do to create the money that you want, or the things that you want, for example, the food or the house or the travel or everything, if you release the desire, you know, because to create something, I think we have to desire that. If we don't desire, how we're gonna create that? Because I think it's different. It's not attachment. It's just I want, you know, for example, I want the money. It's not that I have the attachment for that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? My question? Yep. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's understanding how we define cravings, desires, attachments, wants, expectations. These are all words that you're probably using right now, but you might not be associating the meaning that we use in these teachings to those words. So craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations, this is the mind longing and yearning for something. It's the difference between a want and a need. As long as you chase your wants, there's a longing, yearning, desire. There's an attachment. There's a wanting, thinking this external thing is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind might chase after more money, 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 more money. I need money, 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 right? The mind just thinks that this money is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So it chases after it. And as long as you chase after it, there's never going to be enough. As soon as you get to $30,000 a year in your salary, you'll be happy for a period of time, but then that'll fade away, and then you'll want 50. And then you'll chase. You'll be happy for a period of time, and then you'll want 80, right? And then the mind just keeps chasing and chasing and chasing because it wants, it desires, it's longing, it's yearning. It thinks the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So it chases after it. What you would like to get to is to the point where you realize you need money in your life. You need a certain income to pay for food, water, clothing, shelter, medical care. These kinds of things are important for you, and you need those to sustain your life. But you can acquire your needs in life without chasing them, without longing, yearning for them. So it's a matter of training the mind to pursue its goals, its objectives, its interests, pursuing its needs, rather than chasing after its wants. So that's how we refer to a desire. So when you say, like, I want this money, that's the way that the mind thinks when it doesn't understand how the mind is craving and desiring and longing, yearning for these things. But you can train your mind to pursue your goals and objectives. Essentially what the Buddha did is he taught this middle way. Whereas if you chase and chase and chase and chase after things, your mind's never going to be content and peaceful and joyful because there's never going to be enough. But also, if you were over here on this side where you were indifferent and you didn't care less about whether you had clothing, whether you had food, whether you had water, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful there either because you're not going to have the resources that you need. So rather than living with craving, desire, attachment, or in this indifference, instead you come to the middle where you progress towards things as a goal, as an objective or an interest, pursuing your needs rather than your wants. And that's where you can maintain your contentedness and your joy, because you're no longer longing, yearning for things. I don't know about your culture. Do you have the saying of the grass is always greener on the other side? Yeah. So this is like a common thing that some cultures have, is like the grass is always greener on the other side. So you're never content with where you're at. You always want to go to the other side of the fence because the mind thinks the grass is greener over there. But then when you get over there, you realize that the grass is just as green over here as it is over there. But yet you put forth all that work and effort to get to the other side of the fence, right? So that's what the unenlightened mind is essentially doing, is it always thinks the grass is greener somewhere else. It's never content with where it's at in the unenlightened state. So it always thinks there's something else. I've got to go here. I've got to go there. I've got to do this. I got to do this. I got to chase this. I want a boyfriend, or a girlfriend, or I chase a boyfriend or girlfriend. You get a boyfriend or girlfriend. You're happy for a period of time, but then you realize, I want more money. I chase that. And then you chase more money, and you're happy for a period of time, but then you want a nicer car, a nicer house. You want this, you want that. And the mind just has these endless chasing of its wants, of its desires. So you learn and you train, and the mind needs to get used to practicing pursuing its needs versus its wants. And that's where you can find the peacefulness and joy. And that's the tools and techniques that the Buddha is going to give you to help you learn how to do that. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions you guys have? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions here. Oh, you have a question, Ramos? Okay, yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Not sure if you would actually kind of know this. It's a little bit more on the cultural side of Buddhism, but here you mentioned it just when we started, different names for the Buddha. So I've been hearing about these and a bit confused about it. It's like Maitreya is one word, or what I heard, and then there's a...
Batteries give out. There's some impermanence. Everything around you is impermanent, including the batteries. You can get another mic, and then there's more batteries over there too.
Hello, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so then the lotus-born master I heard something about, and then the different types of Buddhism. So we have Theravada, and then Mahayana, and then there's one...
Vajrayana.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they are all at all connected, and I don't know if you can expand on that a little bit.
Sure, I can explain all this for you.
Yeah.
So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he shared the teachings that lead to enlightenment. There were other people who were teaching during the lifetime of the Buddha that were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But as I mentioned, the Buddha independently discovers the teachings. They dedicate the rest of their life and they preserve the teachings so other people can get to enlightenment. So he knew it was his teachings that led to enlightenment, even though there were other people teaching that were claiming that it was their teachings that lead to enlightenment. But the way that a Buddha functions is, not everybody knows that he's an actual Buddha. It's not like there's an outward characteristic that determines that he's a Buddha. It's not like his ears turned a certain way and then everybody knows that he's a Buddha because of that. It's not like he goes around and performs a bunch of miracles to try to convince people that he's actually enlightened and that he's a Buddha. Instead, he just starts sharing his teachings, and you can independently verify his teachings. When you learn his original teachings, you can learn them, investigate them, examine them. You can reflect on them to independently verify them. You can practice them, and you can see that they actually work. So people not knowing that he's an actual Buddha is actually really helpful for a Buddha, because a Buddha can more readily observe the qualities of their student's mind and then offer them teachings. Whereas if everybody knew that he was a Buddha by performing a bunch of miracles, then people would kind of be on their best behavior when they were around the Buddha. And then he wouldn't be able to see their natural mind and then be able to share teachings with them that would actually help them. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, there's only one set of teachings, which was his teachings, the Buddha's teachings. And Nowadays, we refer to that as the Theravada tradition. Theravada means the teachings of the elders. So this is the original form of teachings of the Buddha, as close to the lifetime of the Buddha as possible. And we look to the Pali Canon, which is the original source teachings of the Buddha. This Pali Canon is organized in 45 volumes of books. They're very large, thick books about this size, and there's 45 of them. And this is what captured the original teachings from the lifetime of the Buddha. And in the Theravada tradition, which Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and then even parts of southern Vietnam are kind of the focal points for this tradition of Buddhism. We consider the Pali Canon to be the original source teachings of the Buddha, and we're not interested in changing them, because whatever the Buddha discovered as what leads to enlightenment, that's what leads to enlightenment. And we're interested in only learning what he did in order to get to enlightenment. But then after he died, several hundred years later, and as time went on, there started to be these fractures where people started going off and creating their own set of teachings. And they still labeled it Buddhism. It's kind of like riding on the coattails of the Buddha, and they changed his teachings, they modified his teachings, and then they called it something else. But they still used the word Buddhism, which the Buddha advised during his lifetime that it'd be very unwise to change his teachings, because a Buddha discovers this is what it takes to get to enlightenment. And as soon as you start modifying and changing that, it makes it more difficult for everybody to get to enlightenment. So what a Buddha does during their lifetime, and the Buddha lived for 80 years, but he taught for 45, is he puts lights down along the sides of the path, making it very clear this is how to get to enlightenment. So over time, because of impermanence, people knock over those lights, people put them out, and then this makes it really hard for people 2,500 years later to potentially get to enlightenment, because these things have been changed. So from Theravada Buddhism, about 500 to 1,000 years later, there's another form of Buddhism that kind of spawns, which is called Mahayana Buddhism. Nowadays, this is practiced mostly in China, but you'll see it all over the world. Just like Theravada Buddhism, you see it all over the world. But Mahayana Buddhism has changed the teachings. There can only really be one Buddhism, which is what the Buddha originally taught, but you get this other branch of Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism. And then off of that, you get other branches like Zen Buddhism. And then there's a form of Buddhism that they call Vajrayana Buddhism. If you guys are familiar with the Dalai Lama, this is the form of teachings that he practices. So the Dalai Lama isn't like the Pope of Buddhism. Sometimes people think that he's like the Pope of Buddhism. If you're familiar with Catholicism, he is one monk of many monks in the world that are sharing teachings. And in the Vajrayana tradition, they are really far away from what the Buddha originally taught. There's lots of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship and prayer and all these kinds of things. Even here in Thailand, you'll see some temples that are doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer. And whenever you see those things, right away you know that that's not the teachings of the Buddha, because the Buddha never taught any of those things. He taught you to train your mind, not to do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So you get these different branches of things. There's probably 200 or 300 different branches of Buddhism that people refer to as Buddhism. But in my opinion, there can only be one Buddhism, because there was only one Buddha. And it's whatever he taught that is going to actually lead to your enlightenment. And that's where you can independently verify. If you study the original words of the Buddha, you can see what he taught, and you can see what he didn't teach. And what you'll find is there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world about his teachings. Like one of the biggest common myths that people have is that the Buddha sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. Did you guys hear this? Anybody hear this? No? Not so much anymore? A little bit, right? So that's not what he actually did. When you read his actual teachings, he says really clearly, he said, I did not get to enlightenment instantaneously. That it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And then he says, here's how you get to gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And he explains to you how to actually get to enlightenment. So these books that I share, all the classes, courses, retreats, I base it all on the original words of the Buddha, because that's what leads to enlightenment. And it's best to not think about the teachings of the Buddha as a religion or anything like this, because the way that I think about religion, I think about it as like there's an organization who's collected up teachings. There's one person at the top. Then they disseminate those teachings out to everybody. And now there's certain rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, and everyone needs to believe these certain things. But that's not what the teachings of the Buddha are. are. There's nobody at the top that's determining what everybody else should do. And there isn't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship as well. There's not rules, there's not commandments or anything like that. Instead, the Buddha is sharing teachings with you to understand your mind and understand the natural laws of existence around you. He's explaining to you how the world functions. If you've ever sat and watched the news, or you've ever heard something from a friend and you're just like, I don't understand why dad does that. I just don't understand why mom does that all the time. I just don't understand why these people keep doing this. When you see the news, and you're just like, I don't understand why these people keep doing this. That's because the mind, with this lack of wisdom or unknowing of true reality, it just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And now what people tend to teach is you need to go out into the world and change the world. And sometimes people take that burden on their shoulders of going out into the world and changing the world. Wow, that's such a burden to carry. Well, you don't need to go out into the world and change the world. All you need to do is understand the world. If you understand the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, you will understand why people do what they do. Because the Buddha explains it based on the condition of the mind. He explains to you why these things occur in the world. So when you turn on the news and you see that there's been a murder or a rape or somebody kidnapped a child or something like this, rather than feeling sad and sorrowful, you'll understand exactly why that's occurring in the world, because you understand the natural laws of existence if you study the original teachings of the Buddha, not as beliefs, but you learn them, you reflect on them, and you practice them. And then slowly but surely, your mind awakens to this wisdom where you train your mind more and more to be able to understand these natural laws. And now you understand the world that you live in. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you will struggle. You will have difficulties. You will come to certain decisions that you will get angry. You will get frustrated. You will get agitated. You will get annoyed because you don't understand the natural laws of existence that are around you. You don't understand the world around you. So the mind struggles in these situations where you encounter things that the mind doesn't understand. But by the time you fully awaken to the wisdom of the Buddha, you will be able to fully understand everything that's happening, and your mind won't struggle and have difficulties. So I encourage students to learn the original words of the Buddha. That's why I share those. And I consider that to be the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes people ask me, like, what form of Buddhism do I teach? Most people would consider what I teach to be the Theravada tradition, but even I don't usually identify, I don't identify with that at all, but I don't even say that at all, because what I share are the original teachings of the Buddha, the original words of the Buddha. And if people are calling that Theravada, then okay, that's what I'm teaching is Theravada tradition. But I think of it as these are just the original teachings of the Buddha, the path to enlightenment. He discovered this better way of life. When the Buddha awoke to enlightenment, he didn't say, I discovered a new religion. Come learn my new religion. He didn't say that. He said, I discovered this better way of life. And if you'd like to learn that better way of life, here's how to do that. And then each individual person just chooses to learn and practice it as they like. So there's these main branches of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, but then off of those, there's often multiple different branches as well, about 200 or 300 different branches. But in my opinion, there can only be one set of Buddhism because it's what the Buddha taught, his original words. And then people refer to him from different cultures. They will refer to him in different ways. I think the most common is just the Buddha, right? But then there's Gautama Buddha, and there's different ways to spell that. And then I think in China, I think some people call him Shakyamuni Buddha or something like this. There's different cultures will refer to him different ways. And this is all impermanence, right? There's not just one fixed way to refer to him. I refer to him as the Buddha. He's a real individual, a real human being who lived over 2,500 years ago. He died in 483 BC, which was a little over 2,500 years ago. The term Maitreya Buddha that you've heard, this is how the Buddha referred to the future Buddha, the Buddha that would come after him, because he knew that his teachings would arise in the world, but they wouldn't sustain. He knew that they wouldn't sustain. And he talked about these 500-year cycles that the world would go through, and that his teachings would reach kind of like a low point, and then this new Buddha, Maitreya Buddha, would come into the world and lift his teachings back up in the world and make them aware and available throughout the entire world. And then slowly but surely, the entire world would be able to get to enlightenment. So that's where Maitreya Buddha comes from. That people refer to this new Buddha as that for some people. So you'll see all these different things, all these different branches, but what I encourage people to do is to learn the original words of the Buddha. That's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. And in these books and all the resources that I share, I know that this is a collection of teachings that will lead to your enlightenment, but each individual person needs to decide to pursue that for themselves. I can share with you that the teachings of the Buddha lead exactly where he said they do. They lead to this enlightened mental state where you no longer experience any anger or frustration or even the slightest displeasure in the mind. You can eradicate all of that from the mind. And you don't need to believe me about this. You can learn it, you can reflect on his teachings, you can practice it and see the truth for yourself, that the condition of the mind gradually improves as you train your mind more and more. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Let me check online one more time. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Oh, yes, ma'am.
These days, is it work? Yeah. These days, what I'm thinking about some kind of unfair kind of system or some condition that I have to kind of accept. But I'm not sure what is. One of the title that I read, the book is Radical Acceptance. Maybe I don't know. It's maybe in Buddhist way, what is the acceptance about our situation and condition of living? A lot of times I feel I cannot take this, I cannot accept these things, and I should kind of do something better. I should fix this thing, and then I tried more, and I couldn't fix it, and feel frustrated and sad and kind of hopeless sometimes, many times. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure about what is a kind of acceptance, the concept of acceptance in Buddhist way. It doesn't mean the giving up and just accept without do something better.
Yeah, I hear people talk about this from time to time in various communities that people call Buddhist or books like you mentioned, but you won't find anywhere in the teachings of the Buddha where he talks about acceptance, even though other people talk about this. Instead, what he taught is to learn, to reflect, independently verify his teachings, and to practice and train your mind. You're not accepting anything. Instead, you're independently looking to verify the truth and to get to wisdom. That's the only way to get to wisdom. You're not just accepting anything. Sometimes people think about acceptance, they talk about kind of like faith or something like this. There's no faith. There's no blind faith in Buddhism. In the teachings of the Buddha, you're actively learning. You're independently investigating. A teacher is kind of like a tour guide that's kind of pointing out the resources and pointing out the guidance to help you learn. Like this class is very unstructured and just kind of open to whatever you guys would like to ask about. But typically the courses and retreats and other classes that I teach, they're very structured to help walk you through step by step what you need to build up your foundation and build your understanding on the path to enlightenment. But you'll never hear me say anything about acceptance, because you're not accepting anything. Instead, I encourage students to think about what it is that I share, to examine it, to investigate it, to reflect on it. And where they're unclear about what I'm sharing is to ask questions and seek clarification. So I wouldn't describe anything on the path to enlightenment as acceptance. But this is something you'll sometimes see people writing about or talking about. From my experience, the vast majority of books, the vast majority of temples, they're not actually studying the original words of the Buddha. I've visited over 200 temples in my life, and I've only ever been to one temple that shares the original words of the Buddha. This is less than 1% of the temples. So we're at that low point that the Buddha talked about. He described these 500-year cycles, essentially 2,500 years of history, that the world would get to this low point with his teachings. And that was 2017 was the end of that last 500-year cycle. And you can see exactly what he described in these 500-year cycles would occur, in that we're at that low point where there's very few people in the world that really deeply understand his teachings. So you'll see things like this where people will be writing about all kinds of Buddhist things, and they're calling it Buddhism, but it's really not. Just like a lot of other things, like people have certain views, have certain opinions, and they will kind of piggyback their views and opinions onto the Buddha, and they'll try to cast it as if the Buddha has said these things and talked about these things. But if it's not in the Pali Canon, which is the original source teachings, then everything would be hearsay. So that's why you use the Pali Canon as the original source teachings, and that's why I can share with you that there's nothing that I've ever seen in the Pali Canon where the Buddha talks about acceptance, even though other people nowadays might be talking about those things.
Can we read about those 500 years ago?
I do. I have it in one of the books. I can look to tell you which one it is, because there's a passage where the Buddha is talking about Maitreya Buddha, and he's describing what Maitreya Buddha would do, and then in the part where I share my reflections, there's this other content where the Buddha talks about these 500-year cycles, and I put it in there so that you can read about it. I can explain it to you if you like, and it's also in the book as well. Yeah, you'd like to read it? Okay, yeah, you're welcome to read it. If you'd like, after class, you can come over. I'll look to see which book it's in, and then you can know where to look. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. So this is a very informal class. I will just end by thanking you guys for coming to learn the teachings of the Buddha, because it's helping you. It's helping those close to you, helping all of humanity. As you guys learn and you practice and you choose to transform your mind, you will become more peaceful, more joyful, which is helping you. It's helping the people around you, because you'll have less bitterness and hostility, and you'll be helping all of humanity become a more peaceful and loving place. And at the same time of thanking you for coming to today's class, I'd like to invite you to come to our future classes as well. We have classes on Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday that you're always welcome to attend. And then at various times during the month, we'll have courses and retreats. Some of those are listed on the bulletin board there, but you'll also see the full extensive details of what each course and retreat is about on our website. So you can go to buddhadailywisdom.com, and from there you'll see all the courses and retreats. You'll even be able to access the books and the podcast and the videos and the Facebook group and all the various programs that we offer. So you're always welcome to consult with our website. You're always welcome to talk to me as you need help and you need support. You're welcome to reach out. So enjoy the rest of your day, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.